Hey, greetings there, everybody. It is GleeCon here again with another episode of Lore of Warcraft. On our last episode, we looked at a manga, just kind of a standalone one-off story of some twins that saw their mother die and had to be put down in Darkshore. Maybe that's a quest line. Maybe some of the characters in that, a knight named Dugan, I believe a paladin or knight, I'm not sure, that also passed away. Someone from Airy Peak, someone from the Queldanil Lodge. So a few locations were mentioned that pop up in World of Warcraft, but nothing necessarily that directly even tied it into that zone, other than the approximate age of the characters and the time when we know that they were born. On our last side lore, we've been looking at this World of Warcraft role-playing game, a Dungeons and Dragons 3rd edition thing, so it's a little bit dated even in that. I think we're in 5th edition now. Probably getting close to the end of the 5th edition life. It's been pretty good. It's been going on for a while, which I like 5th edition a lot. It's the best edition that I've enjoyed in the past couple, since probably my favorite one since Advanced 2nd edition. So we did an intro with some flavor text, and then we looked at a history which really recapped everything. And now we're going to look at basically it's the meat of the book. I'd say it's probably 100 pages or so, and we are by no means going to read all of the pages. We're just going to kind of flip through any interesting flavor text or information we'll look at, but we're not going to get into the nitty gritty of the Dungeons and Dragons numbers. That's for a different show. But we will just kind of take a peek at what seems to be here already, knowing that we're right in the middle of the Warcraft 3 lifetime, and what things will pop up in World of Warcraft as we go. This is a scene of Medivh, probably I think from the 3rd game. So stay a while and listen as we read Chapter 2, Heroes. And this is going to be like the races and classes. Maybe a few other things as well. Okay, so we're not going to really even get all into this. All we need to really know is that Dungeons and Dragons has its own races, and these are going to be modifications of these races. So we will read a little bit of the descriptions of the races, and that's just about it. Maybe the description of each type of thing. So we're going to start with humans, which is also Dungeons and Dragons race. They're among the youngest races on Azeroth, but they make up for it by being the most populous. Lifespans generally shorter than the other races. They seem to strive all the harder to achieve great heights in empire building, exploration, and magical study. This aggressive and inquisitive nature leads the various human nations to become quite active and influential in the world. At least such was the case prior to the invasion of the Burning Legion. Human kingdoms have suffered greatly in the course of the 3 wars against the demonic hordes. I don't know if these aren't supposed to all be humans. Some of them are clearly elves, dwarven. Maybe this is a half-elf, possibly. A large number fell in the latest confrontation, leaving behind battered yet unbowed survivors of the Alliance expedition under the command of the sorceress Jaina Proudmoore. The group has begun settlement of the wild continent of Kalimdor. Humans value virtue and honor, though they also pursue interests in power and wealth. After battling the forces of darkness for generations, humans tend to use a warrior's approach to diplomacy: attack first, ask questions later. Aided by belief in the mystical philosophy of the Holy Light, they have fought the hardest and endured the most during the wars against the Horde and the Burning Legion. Despite all their tragedy, humans remain hardy and brave, thoroughly committed to building a strong society in the harsh lands of Kalimdor. Though they lament the passing of their former kingdom of Lordaeron, they look toward a bright future unscarred by the rigors of war and battle. Okay, so their appearance, basically just as you know, whatever. The region, so I guess they are found in a certain region. After the end of the Third War, Alliance forces under Jaina Proudmoore's command pulled to the south of Kalimdor. They founded a stronghold called Theramore, a small walled city on a rocky isle just east of Dustwallow Marsh. Theramore Isle and the nearby mainland fall under human control, and border Durotar, the orcs' new homeland to the north. Humans and orcs maintain a tentative peace along their borders, but clashes are by no means uncommon. Since most of the mighty human warriors and mages lost their lives during the war against the Burning Legion, only a handful of veteran or high-level mages and paladin warriors remain in Theramore. While iron-forged dwarves and some high elves also occupy the small island city, humans hold the seats of greatest power. Goblin vendors and traders are a common enough sight in and around the Rocky Isle. And really, I can't think of much else other than Theramore, where humans have seats of power on Kalimdor. Okay, so here is where we're just going to kind of skim through. It says affiliation. They are affiliated with the Alliance. They're medium-sized. Yeah, this is really just D&D trait stuff. But so they have the typical human traits. And some of this will reflect their racial powers, which is kind of interesting. They have a bonus against fear, which is sort of like their racial power. A bonus to diplomacy, which is sort of like their bonus to reputation grinding. So that's kind of interesting. They're strong against orcs. That falls off. They get an extra feat. And they can be any class. That's pretty much true. Like, well, they can't be. They can't be like shamans and stuff like that. So that actually falls away. Iron Forged dwarves. This would be a new type of dwarf. They're similar to the dwarves in the player's handbook. Originally from Ironforge and Cosmodon on the continent of Lordaeron, they came to Kalimdor as part of the Human Alliance to battle the Burning Legion. In the aftermath of that struggle, the dwarves learned that they might well have been created by an ancient race called the Titans. See, this is a new direction. Legends claim that these beings helped shape the world itself in its earliest days and were eternal enemies to the demons of the Burning Legion. This revelation has triggered a major transformation in dwarven attitude and interest. See, while they're saying this is not canon, these are big lore steps that we haven't taken yet, which do become canon. Where once Ironforged dwarves lived only to mine precious minerals and craft halls of stone, they now revel in exploration and digging for insights into the ancient world their ancestors helped to craft. Ironforged dwarves are obsessed with investigating the relics and locations of Titan holdings throughout Kalimdor. So that Explorers League concept, which is somewhat built as they're going into Northrend, so it does kind of already exist, but here this might be the genesis of that. In addition to an awakening a thirst for discovery, this newfound knowledge also unlocked enchanted energies of their heritage, enabling Ironforged dwarves to perform spectacular feats such as turning their skin to stone for limited periods of time. Again, a racial trait in World of Warcraft. Dwarves are interested in invention as they are exploration. They have virtually perfected the use of firearms such as blunderbusses and cannons. Members of any race can learn to use these mechanical devices, but Ironforged dwarves own an uncanny act for constructing and using them. This is something they have yet to get away from. In World of Warcraft, dwarves are whatever. Yeah, they use guns, but equally as much as anyone else. So that's something that takes some time to shift away. And I don't know that they even really fully accomplish that shift, even while Classic is going on. Classic's probably, the players in Classic are probably what make that shift happen. Okay, Ironforged dwarves retain contact with the Alliance forces on Theramore. They typically go there to resupply, but they roam Kalimdor with archaeological fervor. They do have Baal Modan, the Red Mountain, which is in the southern region of the Barrens, and that's still there. They're affiliated with the Alliance as well. They don't have a super good friendship with the High Elves, but the High Elves are going to fall away. So they get some racial traits. They lose charisma. That's something that changes in the future. In now editions of D&D, there's no maybe or half orcs do. They have the dark vision, stability. Yeah, stone cunning. That's always been a D&D trait. Stone flesh. So this stone flesh becomes, that's funny. I mean, that's cool that we get another racial trait, which they keep for World of Warcraft. Against poison, giants, that kind of falls away, I think. They're good with praise. This kind of goes into the stone cutting. Thalassian. This is a little different. Thalassian, the concept of Thalassian falls away. They like to be fighters. That's from Dungeons and Dragons, but I guess that's probably accurate. Okay, the High Elves, the Quel'Drai, they're all but destroyed. So this is what's a little bit weird. There's not that many left, but this just tells us where we are. Probably by the time that World of Warcraft comes around, there are no high elves. They're gone. They were born long ago, and a band of night elves were exiled from their homeland for continuing to abuse arcane magic. This abuse eventually transformed the exiled night elves into high elves, or the Quel'Darai, as they came to call themselves. In the course of their exile, the high elves founded the nation of Quel'Thalas on the continent of Lordaeron and used their magic to protect themselves from the indigenous peoples, the trolls. In time, they constructed many amazing cities. The high elves rarely interacted with the other races, which they viewed as lesser. Only in times of great danger did high elves seek out aid from dwarves and humans. The Horde posed just such a threat, leading the high elves to join the Alliance. Alas, their wondrous lands were ultimately destroyed for their troubles. Okay, so high elves traveled to Kalimdor in the Third War, a few of them, to help fight the Scourge, and they had no homeland to return to, basically. And really, sort of. Those high elves that left, so these are really going to be a rare and straggly race. They spend much of their time hunting the remaining undead, so the ones that are on Kalimdor just have that hatred for Scourge having destroyed everything. They want to find the world tree and the receptacles of mystical energies to see if they can somehow get something to recreate their own well. Recreate their Sunwell, since the Sunwell's, well, I think it hasn't been destroyed yet. It's been corrupted. We're right around that time period. Okay. They can live up to 2,000 years. They live in Theramore Isle, because again, this is the dwindling high elves. This is probably something that's going to fall by the wayside. They roam. They're affiliated with the Alliance. They're not strong friends of the Night Elves. They do lose Constitution again. That changes. They're magically adept. That's true. They have an arcane ability. And this is tricky because this is, I guess, kind of would be like the Blood Elf. But they don't have these free empowering. The magical addiction, this is sort of more like the Night Elves. So, I mean, Highborn, the Nightborn. So just scanning it, maybe some of these things bleed their way into Blood Elf traits, and some become. That's why I really think the High Elf as a race is going to fall away in future versions of this, which there are. Let's see. Of course, they can use bows. They're good at concentration. Again, this Thalassian language. They like to be sorcerers or wizards, and the fact that sorcerers exist and as opposed to wizards, that's something that does not. That's a D&D thing, not a World of Warcraft thing. Okay, because of their spells, they have that adjusted level. All right, so now we have Night Elves, also known as the Quel'Darai. They are a reclusive race. They are the first race to awaken in the world, so they're the oldest. They're the first to study arcane magic, and that caused a catastrophe that let them forsake it, close themselves off from the world. So now I'm just kind of paraphrasing, because we've read so much of the similar stuff, even in this book. They have Mount Hyjal is where they're linked to with their immortality, but that kind of blows up in their face in the Battle of Mount Hyjal. They are wild and passionate, similar to D&D's wild wood elves or wild elves. They began worshipping nature, Elune, the moon goddess, Cenarius, the demigod of the groves, and Malorn, the way watcher. They're very tall, and this says that they're heavier. I don't know that that sticks around, but because you're so tall, of course, their eyes have no pupils. That sticks. They're no longer immortal, but they too can live a couple thousand years. Okay, the Ashenvale Forest is mostly destroyed, and the druids are running around trying to heal the land. They live in and around the village of Nighthaven, which is located within the Moonglade. So those places exist still, but that their seat of power becomes what we read in Chronicles over by Darkshore and the new tree, Teldrassil, maybe. All right, so they are considered to be part of the Alliance. The They don't like the High Elves, and they fight the Satyrs and Furbolgs. Okay, it says they're not the life of the party among the Alliance races. And this has got to advance some because they're pretty solid allies of the Alliance by the time World of Warcraft starts. It says, of all the Alliance races, Night Elves show the highest incidence of going over to the Horde. It's because their hatred of the High Elves overwhelms the dislike of the Orcs. Interesting. So that's something that I think that World of Warcraft is ripe for that type of thing. Cross-faction, cross-racial thing. It's kind of neat. Okay. They have Shadow Meld. That they've had since Warcraft 3, and yes, that's a racial power. Their spell resistance, I think they have something, maybe a nature resistance. They get better at survival checks. They'd like to be a scout. They cannot be mages, and I wonder if that sticks. We talked about that on the last couple episodes ago. All right, so you can be goblins as well. Let's see what they say about their goblin society. I'm a little more curious in this. Goblins are crafty and shrewd, small humanoids with an overwhelming interest in commerce and a strong curiosity about all things mechanical. Goblin society is a fragmented thing at best, defined chiefly by commerce and trade. The ultimate schemers and con artists, goblins are always in search of a better deal. That's pretty much how they are now. They like technology. They have engineers. They work on machines. Okay. They are envious of the guns of the dwarves, and they like the profit that can come from that. Goblins will not master that aspect of technology for some time because they end up blowing stuff up. Trade princes rule over their holdings, and they live in the Goblin Island city of Undermine. They each control their own private armies and fleets. So that, the Undermine, I don't know. I wonder if that exists anywhere else outside of this book. That's interesting. The trade princes are the most cunning. They are tenacious fighters, tricksters, con artists. They're tiny. They look the same. Goblin ships raid the seas, so they were already kind of some pirates, so that's something that stays. They like the port of Ratchet. I wonder, I don't know that we've heard of this before. I mean, the book we're reading talks about Ratchet, so I just don't know if that is, maybe that's in Warcraft 3. It's on the eastern shore of the Barrens. They're essentially neutral to everyone, which that's how they start in Classic. That's interesting. They have no affiliation, so they're a neutral race to start. We do know they will eventually join the Horde. What do they have? They have appraise, craft, diplomacy, listen, or crafting. So they kind of changed that into some tinkering, I'm thinking. And that's their favorite class as the tinker. So we'll kind of look at that when we get to the class portion. Half elves. Now this is interesting because there's not many of these that exist in the actual World of Warcraft universe. Very few. But there are some. Children of the heroes that we've read about. For instance, Verisa and Verisa, I think she's the youngest. So Verisa with Ronan. You have Illyria and Turalian. And if they didn't die, maybe Sylvanas and Nathanos. All right, so it says they don't have a lot of acceptance. They look similar to humans, and they are half high elf, half human, which are the half elves that we know from the books as well, and that will come in the future. They associate more with humans. I guess that's more of a Dungeons and Dragons prejudice of elves stands more. Okay, but this is not a class that exists in World of Warcraft. It says half night elves is kind of like a ridiculous concept because at this point in time, they've barely ever interacted with each other. So you could tweak the rules in your own campaign, but they're saying it doesn't make sense to have a half night elf, half human. Half orc. This to me would also be a little more rare. Um, they did this because Garona was one, but at some point we know we're going to get out of that and retcon it and make the half orcs, half Draenei, half orcs. Um, this is more of a call out to say the Dungeons and Dragons thing. They could be either faction, but yeah, this is just something. I'm sure there are a few out there, but the orcs usually breed with other races, not humans. It's that's just a weird thing. Now, the orc race, being able to play that, I don't know if you could do that in regular 5th edition, so this is cool. They give their history. They're serving under thrall. They do value honor. I like that. They're starting to transition the orcs. That's already started with Warcraft 3, but I do like that they're doubling down on that. Elf Kicker. Okay, as a phone name. Let's see. There's a cool picture. I guess that's an orc, but he's got some cool moose antlers. They're part of the horde. I don't know what their racial traits are. Yeah, here we go. So they have a battle rage, which they still do get as their racial trait. They can use orcish claws of attack, which is cool. They like to be fighters also. I love that they're adding the Tauren. I guess that would be similar to the Minotaur race. You could play that. So again, they're just described as the way that we've seen of them. They're like a more Native American style background. There's a picture of one. They're very large. Let's see, they follow Cairn. They live in Thunder Bluff. But these things were established in Warcraft 3. Affiliated with the Horde. Yeah, and that's true. They get a Tauren charge, which the High Mountain Tauren have that. They can use these Tauren totems. That kind of falls away. There are no totems in World of Warcraft. Spears. They have handle animal. So they don't have their herbalism, but I guess they're kind of taking some of that with survival. All right, so here are the classes. So it says there are certain core classes that just don't exist in World of Warcraft. There are no bards. There are no clerics because they have a different version. Because the healers in World of Warcraft don't wear plate mail for the most part or chain. Now it says there are no druids. That should change. There are no monks. That will eventually change. There should be paladins. So that's kind of weird that there are no paladins. There should be. There are paladins all over Warcraft 3. Says there's no rangers. There should be. Rangers are very similar to the hunter class. There's no arcane archers, arcane tricksters, assassins. There should be. Blackguards. Okay, evil paladins. That's kind of like a death knight. It would be cool. Dragon disciple, dwarven defender. This brings me back. I haven't looked at these in a long time. Eldritch Knight, Hierophant, Horizon Walker, Loremaster, Mystic Theurge, Red Wizard, Shadow Dancer, Taumaturgist. We'll look at the ones that do exist. So divine spellcasters are a little bit different. It's saying there will be new spells. That'll probably be a different class. So all they're doing is saying, hey, we're only going to talk about what has changed to the classes. Yeah, they don't choose domains. So basically, they don't have turn or rebuke undead. Yeah, so there's different classes that affect these things. But they're basically saying the way that Warcraft deals with healing is way different than Dungeons and Dragons does. Okay, so the Barbarian exists, although it does not in World of Warcraft. It doesn't make sense. A Barbarian could just be like a fighter. And really, even as classes, they're not that different. They're just saying, hey, yeah, they're cool. The only thing is that orcs are even better at raging. Fighters, they're saying fighters are a little more militaristic. So they gain they're a little bit more like soldiers. So these two would both be really like the warrior class in World of Warcraft. In Dungeons and Dragons, rogues exist the same way they were. Says they use technological device. I guess they're saying let rogues go ahead and use guns and stuff. Sorcerers, they're letting sorcerers still exist in Dungeons and Dragons, although the difference between sorcerers and wizards are so small in that they're not appropriate, and so it doesn't happen. They're all just mages in World of Warcraft or Warcraft. So they just say the sorcerers can't use some specific spells, and they just talk about some of the spells that they can't use, and whatever, who cares. There are some new classes, so they've ditched cleric to totally remake something called a healer. And let's just kind of glance through. It seems very similar to cleric. The only thing I'm thinking is that they do. The main thing I'm noticing, they don't have the heavy armor. They can make potions. That's not necessarily. They probably have the same spell list as before. 20th level spells. No, 9th level. Okay, that stays the same. Yeah, there's just, other than that, I can't see other than potential spell list, which we see right here, which is probably all they've done is curate the cleric spell list. They have a healing touch. Yeah, just a little bit more leaning into the healing magic and less being viable as combatants. The scouts, this is basically, I think, replacing the ranger class, because what's the point otherwise? Which I feel like that's dumb. They gain a wild healing. I mean, rangers could have that. I guess rangers have magic, and you would not want them to have magic. And instead, you're going to kind of give them some rogue-ish type of traits mixed in there. Yeah, that's about the only difference. You're just, because they have these mixture, they can track. So they're like the hunters in WoW. But if you see, they do not have a pet. So I feel like this is unnecessary. Tinkers, yeah, fun for the Dungeons and Dragons, but unnecessary in terms. There's no tinkers in World of Warcraft. Bomb bouncing, fire resistance, bonus technology, scavenging. Yeah, they're just technological. This is like, hey, if you want to be like a little goblin dude. Okay, there's prestige classes, which it says pretty much all of them are either uncommon or non-existent, but these would be the hero classes. I don't remember in 5th edition what you have to do to get a prestige class. Maybe get to a certain level. That would be my guess. And they're just saying like they call them different things. If you're calling them a mounted warrior, yeah, so they're saying they're called different things. All right. So Beastmaster, this is what what's his name is, the guy from the bonus campaign, Rexar. So I do like that they're doing Beastmaster. They're tough. You're basically making a hunter with a Beastmaster spec. So I do like that this prestige class becomes a spec. Same thing like Rexar was a Beastmaster. So you're getting your animal companion, and you're gaining some powers, magic fame in the Dungeons and Dragons world. But that's cool. It's a night elf with a polar bear. I kind of like that. So they're just showing how they can level up. They can speak with their animals. They can use these. So a lot of these things become part of the hunter toolkit. So I like that. But they really already existed in Warcraft 3. This is not developing them. Druid of the Wild. So yes, you can be a druid, but not in the same sense that a Dungeons and Dragons. So they've scrapped it and they've made a new prestige class. And these are the ones from Warcraft 3. There was really two. There was the bear ones, and there was the Talon. I don't remember which is which. So only Night Elf or Tauren can be them. Let's just kind of see what they get. They continue to advance in spell casting. They get wild shape. So they can become a storm crow, a stag, a night saber, a bear, dire bear, or a treant. So that's cool. And actually, I don't think there's any transformation into treants in Warcraft 3, but yes, you can become one. So I think this is another nod. I like these little things. Like, I feel like they definitely drew on what, like, the people that made this, Metzen and all, Grubb and all these other people that are making writing World of, they 100% thought how they wanted to do this. I bet you this was a pet project, and they took some of the ideas that they really liked and they put it right in World of Warcraft. Um, those are all of the wild shapes. It's cool, except for Wildkin form. They have dream walking, which is pretty cool. They do get spell casting, a divine spell casting class, and it could be so you could make a healer become a druid. They get some of the stuff, but mostly it's that shape shifting. That's pretty cool. This is their spell list. I'm not going to really get into it, but all right, the Elven Ranger. So here we have a Ranger class, but this one is probably just a little different than the Scout. I guess you would prestige from Scout into Elven Ranger. That makes the most sense based on the characters. They can have favorite enemies. I like Murlocs on there. That's pretty cool. Harvest Golem. Interesting. Because I don't know. Like, I guess that would be the machines, but I wonder if they take this idea of the Harvest Golem and that makes it into World of Warcraft, because you've got those robots, those Harvest Golem type of things. Um, but yeah, they have basically arrow skills. They do gain a little bit of magic. They gain better archery style arrow cleave. This is common Dungeons and Dragons type stuff. So they're getting a bunch of um, moves, and their spell list is this is more typical ranger spell list. You would trim away some of that, but hunters do have some kind of magical healing and defensive moves. Gladiator, this would be a nod, I guess, more to Thrall's background. This is obviously not something that comes from, oh, they call it a blade master. So this is what it is. There's no gladiator really in the alliance, but this is the blade master spec class, which is this doesn't really exist. This is, I guess, kind of a version of the fighter. This is more of a nod to Warcraft 3. This does not exist. This kind of is with the blade whirlwind, the what's the warrior class? Fury warrior. This is kind of like a fury warrior spec. Horde assassin spec, love it. That's basically like Garona. So a lot of these things are existing, which is cool because you can't play an assassin in Warcraft 3, but we have talked about it. Garona's definitely been mentioned, so I do like that you're taking Garona and making a whole class out of her. Yeah, they're saying it's pretty much just like assassins, but we get a little bit of different things. Hunters, so this is the actual class as opposed to an elvish ranger. I don't freaking know what the difference, why you would need to, it's really just like a different spec. Camouflages, if you've noticed, if you've been playing lately, that's made a big comeback. It is back in action. Yeah. I feel like this is unnecessary, really, just focusing on the tracking and stuff. But maybe if we really looked into the nitty gritty, we could start to see between the Beastmaster and the Elven Ranger and this one, maybe this is more like a survival hunter. Infiltrator, maybe this is like a subtlety rogue. Yeah, like a spy. I don't even know where this would come from. Probably this is starting to get into the, base. I'd say it's definitely a rogue type of skill. Mounted warrior. This is like the heroes from the game. I don't know why she's riding that weird tiger, almost nude. That's inappropriate. And they said in the beginning, like this would be like a wolf rider or a knight or whatever, a huntress. They get a special mount. No, this is something that just falls by the wayside because everyone can mount up in the actual game. And then they get some moves for their mount, whatever. Paladin. So here we go. Paladin warrior. So they've changed it. I don't know why. I guess taking away some of the spells, but I feel like that's unnecessary. They should have just kept Paladin as a regular class. I think that's kind of dumb that they make it a prestige class. They can smite undead, lay on hands. Those things are still. They can turn, which there's some undead powers, anti-undead powers, especially in the heroes in Warcraft 3. They have a code of conduct. Yeah, so I don't know why you would ditch it unless they just really felt the need to have so much different. Priest. What's the difference between priest and healer? Again, I feel like this is unnecessary. This is just if you're prestiging as a they have an aura. They've got their spells, turning undead. I think this kind of gets, if you wanted to, this is more like a holy spec paladin. Shaman, I do like that they're including the shaman. That's a class that comes in World of Warcraft. They get their spells, which are pulled from, but they're like a mixture of spells if you look at them. So this is cool. This is them really making a new class all to their own, which is pretty cool. Pulling spells from different spell lists. Warlock is also now. I don't know if Warlock existed in Dungeons and Dragons already at this point, but it's the Warlock in Dungeons and Dragons is extremely different from the Warlock in Warcraft. So they are arcane spellcasters. They get some conjuring. They get a little. So this is true. They do get. Now there's not really warlocks that summon demons, but the same way in Warcraft 3. So this is pretty cool that they're really. This is maybe the first area where we're defining them as having this demonic companion nonstop. Because look at their spells. They're all about just summoning the monsters. They just get massive summon monsters. In addition to regular Warlock. So Warlock does already exist. Okay. Ooh, so this is a lot, but if you look, we're already like 100 pages in. So we've done like 70 pages. I know that this is taking long, but it's just because of the quantity. We're not going to go too much even through this because these skills, this is D&D things. I do like how you can craft these different things, and crafting, this is pretty cool because up until you get to World of Warcraft, crafting doesn't exist at all. So at some point it had to enter their mind, let's let them craft things. We could be looking at the birth of those ideas right here as well. With all of these crafting, making their gunpowder is diplomacy, which those skills have changed now and by the time we're at 5th edition. Disable device. I'm skipping some of these that are more D&D type of things. Yeah. Okay, so most of this is just how these things are modified. Use technological devices, a new skill. So that would be for the people that want to use guns, bombs, etc. Yeah, spot. That's changed. Perception now. Okay, so you get some technology. Oh, they've even got some feats. Feats is something that's changed a lot. I always liked feats, and I don't like how they really play such a minimal role in current Dungeons and Dragons. And these are things I guess you would pick, like like bash. That's a fighter move. Battle cry. That's a warrior move. Battle language, nothing. Block spell, maybe that's warrior. Brilliant leadership. That's kind of like arcane intellect a little bit. Build firearms. It's crafting. Siege weapons. Building. Close shot. Yeah, that's unnecessary in World of Warcraft. Collective Fury. It's kind of like another battle shout. Deflect magic as a warrior move. Drums of Courage. That's actually something you can craft with leatherworking. This might be like a mecha gnome power. thorium weapons. Interesting that things are made out of thorium. I wonder how much that's been talked about, or if this is a genesis of that. Follower of the totem. Well, totems do come from shamans, but magic energy control. No. Pistol whip. No. Interesting pictures of old school picture of Tauren fighting these wizards and warriors. Reflect spell. There's a counter spell. Ride bareback. Yep, do it all the time. Trick shot. That is bouncing it off. That's something that makes its way in. Yeah, so they're definitely. These are not coincidences. These definitely made their way into World of Warcraft. Love it. Like they had to. Like these guys, the creators of it, had to be in on making this game, and so you would not lose those ideas. You would keep them going. War Stomp. That's 100% a Tauren power soap. But actually, that might be from Warcraft 3. All right, so we're going to read this little page and a half of flavor text, and that will be wrapped up this episode. And I know we just really blasted through a lot, and a lot of it's just whatever. It's more of a curiosity or an interesting. But if you take nothing else away from this episode, this meandering, long, but also surface level only skim episode, I'm taking away just how many ideas, how many skills, how many powers made their way and had their origin right here in this book and still exist today in the World of Warcraft retail that we're playing right now. All right, let's read this little mini aside. Halak Darkhorn, Tauren warrior in the service of the Alliance, moved among the ruins, alert for any potential threat that would harm the humans who followed him. He found Murloc footprints earlier in the day, but they were small ones, not the strange mutant versions that had become increasingly common. Murlocs were nothing that humans could not handle on their own. They remained uneasy around him, the humans did. Part of it was that he was so much larger and stronger than they were. Of greater influence, though, was that most of his brethren had thrown their lot in with the Orc horde. Humans saw his bestial features and assumed he was just a mindless follower of the Greenskins. Yet Helak had learned to mistrust orcs. They seemed too quick to fight, and too willing to fight dirty to be considered honorable. Then he learned that they came from another world entirely and were led for many years by demon-worshipping warlocks. That was enough for Helak. His fellow Tauren might welcome the orcs as spirit brothers, but he could not abide it. Though humans were far from lacking in faults, Helak felt they possessed a core of honor. He had come to them cautiously, serving as a scout for the armored knights and their powerful paladin warriors. The order and organization of their peoples impressed him. Yes, they were distrustful of him, but then one is always distrustful of the new. All the more reason to serve well and speak quietly, reassuring them that not all Tauren were to be lumped with orcs. The hackles rose on the back of his mane when he heard the shift of stones around a corner. He was not alone in the ruins. Helak froze, his massive chest barely rising as he waited. Another shifting of stones, then footsteps on loose gravel. Not the heavy tread of Tauren or trolls, nor as light as the various elven breeds, human or dwarf likely, and therefore alliance. Helak moved slowly around the corner, letting his thundering hooves warn of his approach. A female human crouched behind a tree, watching his advance carefully. She was dressed in common adventuring leathers without insignia or badge. Her eyes were wide, but he saw no fear in them. Probably a scout like me, Helak thought, sent ahead to see that the horde had set no ambushes. Still, though he sensed no fear in her, she was clearly tense. Helak shook his massive head. When would they learn not to judge based on surface appearances? Helak slung his axe into the sheath on his back and approached closely, his hands out and palms up to show he meant no harm. Helak knew that he was an imposing figure, even unarmed. "Do not fear," he said. "I am a scout working for the Alliance." The woman moved upon hearing these words, though not as Helak had anticipated. She stepped from the tree with a spear in her hand, driving the tip deep into his chest before he could react. Helak snarled and swung at her, but she let go of the spear and danced backward, drawing a serrated blade as she did so. "Fool!" Helak thundered. "I am on your side!" He felt a cold chill spread through his veins from the wound, and his legs were quickly growing numb. The weapon is envenomed, Halleck realized, coated with a thick paste that deadens the flesh and stops the heart. Humans did not use such things. This was a weapon of the Horde. Halleck raised his head with effort to confront his assailant. The human stood with weapon ready, a snarl on her lips. The Tauren staggered forward a step, then collapsed at her feet, the ground rumbling with the force of his fall. He struggled to rise, but the poison worked too swiftly. As the poison stilled his heart, Halleck saw the human smile. Yala Danfor, human warrior in the service of the Horde, knelt before the fallen Tauren. The smile lingered on her face as she began sawing off the creature's horns. Orc masters would pay a hefty bounty for the death of a traitor. So I think one thing that's establishing is that in this world right here, you could be either whatever, regardless of your race, you could be Horde or Alliance. I don't know how they could effectively pull it off, but there's something to be said. They have NPCs that sort of switch roles like that in World of Warcraft, or at least play neutral parties. And we're getting there with some of the things, but it's tough. Do you go against the nature of the beast, where conflict is at the heart and core of the Warcraft universe, to create some interesting stories like that? I don't know. All right, everyone. I appreciate you. Thank you so much for watching, for listening. Hopefully this is a nice little intriguing aside on this Lore of Warcraft show. This episode, in the pipe, 5x5.